You're listening to the Diginauts on the Good Talk Podcast Network.
Welcome to the inaugural episode of the Diginauts,
where we'll talk about robots, cars, nanotechnology, GMOs, and more.
Do your parents have the right to show you naked on the internet?
Quite possibly.
We're going there.
Look out.
Coming right up on the Diginauts.
Technology.
Society.
Technology.
Policy.
Technology.
Technology.
The future. Changing by the day.
Diginauts. Hello and welcome, people of Earth. I am Darren.
And I'm Eric.
And you have discovered the Diginauts. This is a podcast all about technology and society. We are going to be bringing you the latest in the news where it has to do with sort of being a human in our 21st century digital world.
Definitely changing by the day.
Seriously. There is no shortage of news about technology taking over our lives. We are going to be talking a lot about robots today. And, you know, here in our first week of scanning what we're going to talk about, we came up with 4 or 5 robot articles. They just jumped out, so no shortage. So, Eric, what's our first one?
So Uber launched kind of their autonomous driving initiative in Pittsburgh, predominantly because of Carnegie Mellon's location. Lots of engineers, lots of technology. I think many companies even poached Carnegie Mellon's professor staff to join disparate companies. Nice.
So the way this works then, I use my Uber app, send I want to ride, and then a car shows up.
A car shows up, indeed, but believe it or not, there's still a driver. Go figure.
Oh, really?
There is.
So it's driverless, but there's a driver.
Exactly. Just pretend he or she is not there.
So is that person getting paid to sit in the seat and do nothing?
Well, I wouldn't say nothing. I would hope they're paid. But in reality, I think everyone admits that the technology is not quite there yet. So there needs to be a person, the shepherd for the sheep, to make sure nothing really goes wrong.
That's an interesting middle ground. Like we've had, because Google's been playing with autonomous cars, and didn't they kill somebody?
I'm not sure if they killed somebody. I mean,
I'm going to look it up.
In reality, I think, everyone's, when Tesla has a crash in autonomous mode or semi-autonomous mode.
It was Tesla, not Google.
Yeah. People in the government freak out. But in reality, you look at the rates, it's far safer.
Right. I mean, this is the fundamental thing about driverless cars, right? It's the moment one of them goes wrong, it's, wow, this is unsafe, this technology. I mean, I can't believe we ever let a car drive itself.
Right.
However, the fact is, like, humans crash into things all the time. Almost definitely more often than a robot is going to, right?
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's so many benefits. You save time, you can do so much more. You can watch TV, you could work while you're commuting, driving, whatever you want to call it. And in reality, I think, people compare, there'll be so many fewer jobs, so to speak, as a result of the autonomous vehicles. People might not even need garages, so people might wind up with even more space where they live. You won't have to store a vehicle in the further future, so to speak.
I hadn't thought about that part. So you just like, you don't have a car.
Right.
You just call one.
It's car as a service.
Wow.
And, I think people, when ATMs came out, people freaked out. Like, where will all these people go? What will they do? But in reality, we still, unfortunately, have banks and bank tellers and ATMs at the same time.
Right. Yeah, well, so, for example, I looked it up. There's an article in New Scientist about the Tesla crash. Sorry, Google, don't.
You're in trouble now.
The Tesla crash, it says that it was at an intersection, and it was the driver who was killed. So it must have been the same thing, that they were testing out the system, and the car was unable to detect a truck that was coming in the
Right.
opposite direction because it was bright and the truck was white, and so the software didn't pick that up. And I guess that would be a good reason to have a driver, right? That,
Well, indeed.
Backup system, human says, stop it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that person allegedly had also taken many trips in autonomous mode while watching, allegedly, movies on an iPad and things like that. So I think he really took it beyond the limits.
Right.
In reality, it's not fully autonomous. You have to pay attention. They explicitly tell you to do so.
Now, that's a scary thing, right? Like, the fact of the matter is, humans kind of have passive and active attention modes, right?
Fair?
And we see this in all sorts of things, like the whole, the kids playing Pokemon who jumped off a cliff, or
Right.
not jumped off a cliff, but they were in the virtual world, and
Yep.
so they lost the perception of what was going on in the actual world, and
Right.
literally walked off a cliff, right? So, is it even something humans can do? Like, I'm in passive mode until something happens? Like, are you sitting there waiting for the car to need you?
Right. I mean, I from what I've seen on YouTube and the videos of autonomous mode in the Tesla, it summons you via a tone. It'll be like bing, bing, and then you have to grab the wheel. Obviously,
Okay.
if you don't, there's probably going to be an accident. But to your point, I don't think I could candidly go from reading a book to all of a sudden, responding to a tone to address whatever situation is
Yeah.
immediately in front of me.
I mean, if you literally have a book in your hands, right? You
Right.
have to drop the book and get your hands up there and then process, like, oh, you're about to hit somebody. There's crosswalks full or whatever.
Right.
I mean, I assume there has to be things like crosswalk full that the cars are better at
Sure.
than other things. Obviously, this was kind of an unforeseen in the case of the one fatality. Kind of a quirk of the system.
I think also as a result of that accident that you're talking about, Tesla is changing their technology.
Right.
They're doing an over-an-air update and changing towards more radar and less, I think, sensor.
Okay. I can't decide whether, and I think that's the human reaction, right? Like, okay, cool. Like, I mean, it seems inevitable.
Right.
We'll definitely wind up in a whole bunch of cars. I actually was halfway thinking of having the conversation with my parents of like, hey, when you get that age, right? So
Interesting.
they went through the process with my grandmother of taking her car away a couple years back.
Right.
And this was, she had gotten dangerous. She couldn't see something and hit it. And it was like, okay, we're done.
Right.
And so watching them go through that, I kind of thought, maybe I should have a conversation with them about, hey guys, when the time comes, how do we want to do this?
But I think it solves the danger factor in that scenario. But what if I'm 98 and all of a sudden I summon my car and I say I want to go to Texas from California, but for no apparent reason?
Well, then God bless. But I mean, that should be theoretically the fulfillment, right? There's nothing, right? And the problem with for my grandma was that it left her housebound basically,
Right.
unless somebody came and got her and took her somewhere. She was housebound. But if we're living in this future world where anybody can call up a car and the car will show up in a reasonable amount of time and take you to wherever you want to go, then that should be quite a bit of freedom.
Oh,
But
I'm all for it. So, so older people will have more freedom. People will have more time on their hands. But in reality, some people still may die as the result of these autonomous cars.
okay, but we just said that theoretically, once the software's, the bugs worked out, you're gonna, right? They should be killing less people. So what's the hitch?
Fair. I mean, let's say there's a crosswalk full of people ahead of you, and on the right and left there are bicyclists. And, maybe all of a sudden you're going too fast or there's ice on the road and you cannot stop.
Wow. So there has to be built into the algorithm something that determines what to do in the worst of situations.
Right. Like who should die? The cyclists or the pedestrians in the crosswalk?
So it's a Spock, the needs of the many outweigh the needs, like, right? Is it, I mean, because how else, this is what the show's about, by the way, is the sort of philosophical conundrums that come along with advancing technology. A human being in that situation might have prejudice to, like,
right.
Oh, there's a bunch of kids, right? For
right.
example, let me not kill the kids, but this dude on the side of me looks pretty terrible. I'm going to kill him.
Or the cyclist on the left has a helmet and
right.
knee pads.
I mean, I don't know if a human has, in that flash situation is going to be able to make that. Maybe they do.
Fair.
I don't know. But yeah, is that actually going into the algorithm then? Like the vehicle on the right has a 36.2% chance of surviving being sideswiped, whereas the toddlers in the crosswalk will never survive if I don't hit a swerve. Like if I slam on the brakes, I won't decelerate and not like. Is all of that built into the algorithm controlling the car?
I think even furthermore, like to your point, age, gender, ethnicity. I mean, will these systems recognize the people as individuals? Like, oh, that's Fred, and Fred has cancer, and
oh wow, no, that's not our future, is it?
I don't know.
Eventually, robots will do everything, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, they have to be able to recognize a lot of things, and already, image recognition is pretty advanced.
But the moment you go there, that means that robots are walking the planet, assessing us for our odds of survival. Like the computer is saying there's a 46% chance that he's got 20 years left and a 26% chance that she's got only 3 years left, and the computer is judging human life value. And who decides what goes into the computer programs to begin with, right? Out of, which, like, is, and I work in software. Like, the meetings that go into these kinds of things, I can't imagine the decision by committee of how are we going to build the let's decide which human has to die in the emergency situation algorithm.
Well, I mean, I think nothing's perfect, and I think therein lies a flaw, no matter whether it's autonomous or not. I mean, people are at the heart of all of this. So whatever logic, whatever politics, whatever government policy comes into play, it's all going to be exposed programmatically.
And this is unfortunately going to be what we experience on this show over and over again. We'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Indeed.
So be it. But meanwhile, all of you listening, all three of you listening?
3,000?
3,000 of you listening. Hit us up on Twitter. Let us know what you think about autonomous cars. Would you get in one? Would you get in one today? Would you get in one 5 years from now? Would you sell your car and replace it with only autonomous driving? Are you looking forward to the future where our highways are filled with robots taking us from place to place? Let us know what you think. So we were trying to figure out who you are out there in our audience. We figured odds are you're folks like us who enjoy technology, maybe entrepreneurship. Maybe you're the kind of people who, I don't know, me and Eric, we sit around trying to figure out how to get rich by starting internet companies. I don't know. How many internet companies did you start last week, Eric?
Too many. But I find myself graphically challenged.
Is that the term for it?
I think so.
Well, aren't you lucky that this podcast has ads, because you could go to Logo Nerds. You could get yourself a logo. Are they the most amazing logos in the world?
Yes.
No, they're not. I'm not going to pretend they are. But here's what they are. They are $27 for a logo. And I don't know about you, not every idea I have is worth sinking, say, $40 into. But I can try out for $27. I can get a very passable logo, and then I can find out if my minimum product is indeed viable. So if you are that type of person, by all means, go to goodtalknetwork.com/ads. Click on the ad for Logo Nerds. You can get 3 different ad concepts for just $27. Where are you going to beat that? Plus, you'll be supporting this podcast. We are back. Welcome to segment 2. This podcast is going to be a 5-segment podcast each episode, and we're going to have different themes for some of the different segments. Today, we're going to introduce you to one that we like to call jurisprudent. And the idea behind this is that technology moves faster than law. The people who are making decisions on what the laws of our land are don't have a tendency to be folks who are super young, super hip, and super into technology.
Not at all.
Not even a little bit. And so that means that there's a lot of policy to be decided where, you know, the folks deciding it don't necessarily have the background. We're going to dive into that on a regular basis because this is really a big part of where, like we say, technology and society meet. For our first jurisprudent, we're going to look at this headline off of Engadget. It says, North Carolina cops will be first in nation to use weaponized drones. Now, I read that. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be good if it decreases, you know, the potential for ending someone's life above and beyond someone who is putting the public at danger. But, you know, you think about all the police shootings that have happened recently where they're not using drones. They're using their hands, their guns, their tasers. There's been a lot of incidents that just clearly on camera are not right. You know, people with hands in their air and they're shot dead. So I guess the question is, will this make that better, worse? Are the cops safer? Are the people safer? I don't know.
Yeah, it actually then connects into the same segment we were just talking about, right? You have to then write decision-making algorithms about life and death situations into a, you know, electronic device and let it decide who lives and who dies. But there's actually a lot more layers to this because that headline, as far as I'm concerned, is a little bit disingenuous. When I read it, first in nation to use weaponized drones, it conjured for me the incident that happened in Dallas recently, where there were the protests, and they ended the protest by sending a bomb robot in to take the guy out.
And I liked that choice.
You did?
I did.
Okay, now here we need to talk. Why did you like that choice?
Because he took a lot of people's lives, and I think to minimize further casualty, especially from an officer perspective, given that so many of them were shot by him, you know, if he shoots the robot, so be it.
Right. Now, I agree with you, but I think all things are complicated, and there's two sides to everything, right?
Sure.
And by all means, you're in this situation where lives are in danger. You want that situation to stop.
Right.
But from a theoretical point of view, this was a person who was denied process. They made the call on the scene to end his life. And yeah, okay. They probably were going to end his life anyway, and they did it in a way that put the least risk on them. But there was never, you know, an arrest made. And I think, you know, and not to live in dreamland, right? But I want all altercations to end with the person, you know, apprehended, detained, and given their day in court.
Right.
So,
I mean, that's pretty perfect world scenario.
Of course it is. And I completely get that. I just think it's a scary and slippery slope. If we start, well, there was that one situation where the police needed a robot with a bomb on it. So we probably need a robot with a bomb on it in all police forces. And the next time we're in a standoff and, you know, you got more of a Barney Fife trigger-happy cop out there, right? Well, I've been itching for a chance to strap a bomb on the old robot.
To try the robot.
Right? So I thought this was a pretty scary headline. Now, if you dig deeper into it, it's a more complicated situation than this headline presents. I think this is a bit of a clickbaity headline on the part of Engadget, in my opinion, because it doesn't say anything about non-lethal, and that's what the law that was passed actually says. right? So my image was a drone flying around with a shotgun, right? Going. So the drones are going to be permitted to have non-lethal weapons on them. But, what does that mean? It means beanbags, sound cannons, tear gas.
Right. But in reality, it's not as if they're autonomous drones. Correct me if I'm wrong. People are still controlling them, right?
They're unmanned. One of the complications that got brought up in the conversation, though, is that, you ever play, what's the video game where you can call in the airstrike?
Oh, I forgot.
And it looks just like the way it works in the real world.
Yeah.
But it's you got infrared on the warehouse that's got, let's say, bad guys in it.
Sure.
And you call in your airstrike and it is amazingly satisfying.
Right.
But it is very much dehumanized.
Sure, and that airstrike could have been on a AA meeting instead of your intended.
And this is another one of those places where it's like, did you do the due diligence?
Right.
So in organizing this law, they were having conversations about these ideas of, well, it's one thing for a man on the ground to make the call on whether to use deadly force. It's another thing entirely for somebody sitting back at the station to look on a monitor and decide whether that dot is getting too close to that other dot. Right?
Sure.
So that was one of the things that they...
So your preference, if they are used, people on scene have to be controlling them, not someone in Washington, D.C.
I don't know. I think this is a scary frontier, right? And obviously these are the kinds of things, like every time a new technology is introduced, it takes humanity a while to suss out how we're going to land on how it works. But yeah, absolutely. Like the idea of distant, like at what point do you not just like sort of, well, it's more efficient if we have a centralized bank of computers where people are handling the drones in all the different cities, and you know what? Let's outsource that.
Or the high school kids get access to.
They'd probably be better at it. They've had the practice. I do think that's a little bit concerning. Now, if you dig further into the way the bill went down, the representative who introduced it, he was a Republican out of North Dakota. His name was Rick Becker, and he was initially attempting to talk about whether they needed warrants, and he didn't want to. I believe the initial law said you can't have weapons on it. And in order to put the restrictions on warrants, they introduced an amendment thanks to some lobbying. Because of that, they said, okay, well, we can now use non-lethal weapons. Now, what's interesting is to hear him comment back, and the upshot of all of this is, well, yeah, it turns out that's actually already legal.
What is?
Having weapons on drones, and legal in many states, because it's one of those things where it's like, Abe Lincoln didn't sit down and write a law saying, hey, when you have a mechanized drone flying through the sky, either do or don't have a handgun attached to it, right? Like, this is something where there is no law. And because there is no law, it's theoretically legal in many places. And the fact that what they did here was they made it explicitly legal as opposed to gray area in some places, or, so the argument is like, no, we didn't do anything. It's legal everywhere.
So now, Second Amendment may very well spur increased drone sales above and beyond what they are now.
And this is actually one of the things that came up a lot in the argument is, I'm not going to quote a source here, but I'll put the articles in the show notes for this episode. They were having a conversation with somebody who was essentially saying, well, you don't want to restrict rights here. You're going to hurt the drone business if you do that. So civil liberties are at odds with the makers of the little flying helicopters.
Who is making those? Is it GoPro? Is it someone else?
I mean, there's a ton of companies that make drones now.
Well, fair enough.
Now that we've kind of got the design out there.
Are they okay with guns hanging from their, Inspire One or?
That's a good question. I don't, but I mean, they've sold the product, so do they get to decide that? I mean, if I buy a Ford pickup and I install a shotgun rack, what does Ford get to say with how I use it, right? So if I'm, I mean, it's different if they were manufacturing weaponized drones, but that's not necessarily what's happening here.
Right.
You can purchase the drone with such a, carrying capacity of whatever.
I mean, a shotgun rack in a pickup truck, though, is, that's just another means of carrying. It's not necessarily, you're not necessarily going to fire your shotgun while it's racked in your pickup.
Okay, well, what if you mount a machine gun on the top of the truck?
There you go.
How that works. Is that legal?
I'm not sure.
I hope not. Anyway, the other wrinkle here then is that the law doesn't define non-lethal weapons. So what different forces you can use, is pretty up in the air. Now, the guy who, or at least one of the folks in the legislature in North Dakota was going to go back and try, when this bill comes up again in a couple of years, to try to strike the part about weapons.
Interesting.
They just wanted to talk about whether or not you need a warrant, which is another story for another day.
Yeah, the warrant thing is confusing to me because, to me, when I think of warrant, it's more about, searching a property, not necessarily using a certain type of weapon or device.
Right. So if you think about searching a property, typically if I get a warrant, that's giving me permission as police officer to go on the property, knock on the door and say, or bust down the door,
Right.
depending on what the judge has said on the case and how much suspicion they have, right? And enter somebody's personal property. Where drones then come into it is like, yeah, but what if I fly over your property?
Right.
And the Supreme Court has come down a couple times that, at least for manned flying over, that you don't need a warrant for that you can fly over somebody's property and gain information. So that sort of restricts your personal property to your indoor personal property.
Interesting.
But then there was another ruling that they can't use infrared technology. So this was like the marijuana farms, where you can't fly over somebody's barn and try to detect the grow lights, let's say, because that's going too far. At least that's where the law stands now. Who knows where it's going to be? So everything changes every day.
Indeed. And, we definitely want to know what you think. Are we right? Are we wrong? Who's crazy in this scenario? So, tweet us and let us know.
Are you a small business owner who wished that you had an app for your business, but you figure that's too hard, there's coding involved, it'll be expensive? No! You can just go to My App Builder. You can go straight to our website, goodtalknetwork.com/ads. There's a banner ad right there for My App Builder, and it allows you to access templates and build your business's app out fast and easy.
In our third segment, we're not going to talk about the present, but more about the future. And we really called this segment Future File. So for this segment, it's really about what we'll call nanofish. We're not talking about a goldfish traveling through your guts or through your veins or through your brain, but in reality, really a case of biomimicry, where scientists have really developed very small, we're talking 100 times smaller than a grain of sand, little pieces of metal, I think comprised of silver and gold, that effectively swim their way through your body, really pulled through your body through magnetic fields administered by doctors.
Oh wow! So whenever I hear about the nanotechnology, right, like I kind of want it to be like on Star Trek, where there's little robots and they're super little, but they're robots, right? Like you can wrap your brain around that, and then whenever it becomes like, hey, we're gonna stick this thing inside you and it's gonna find the cancer and you're all good, it has a tendency to be more like molecules. Is that more what we're talking about?
I mean, what do you mean by molecules?
Well,
mean,
I don't know. I mean, my brain kind of stops at the idea of nano, right?
Right.
Like,
I mean, 100 times smaller than a grain of sand, like that. I mean, it's almost incomprehensible how small that is.
Right. But is it essentially just if I went and got some gold and some silver and a teeny tiny chisel, could I create one of these things, and it's really more about the magnets moving the metal through your body?
I mean, I doubt you could probably make your own anytime soon.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah, any listeners, feel free to go make your own, but
do not listen to him. The owners of this website have wished to strictly make sure that the audience knows that you should not go put things in your body based on our suggestions.
Not at all. But yeah, very small. I think another question is, how do you get this out of someone's body?
Well, do you have to?
I mean, I think you equate it to the solar system. You know, all the space junk. You don't want space junk floating through your body. I
But
mean,
if it's
that will add up.
if it's the size of 1/100th of a grain of sand, like, are they sending a bunch of them?
I think without a doubt. I mean, imagine if it's clearing your arteries. Imagine if it's, to your point earlier, attacking cancer cells. I mean,
So, I mean,
don't
what
think
is this?
You
is
weren't
this,
born with silver and gold in your body.
right. I was. Is this something where? How far are we on this technology? Is this theoretical, or is this? I mean, because I do hear things every once in a while about like super tiny, nano medicine. Are we at a place where this is around the corner? Is it experimental? Is it in trials, or is it just kind of a drawing on a whiteboard?
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably have to follow up with some of that, but I think it's more than conceptual at this point. I mean, I saw a video where literally they're zooming in, hundreds of times in a microscope to show you how this little, gold and silver nanofish is fluttering. So they initially tried mimicking bacteria with kind of a cylindrical tail that was spinning. That really didn't work, I guess, and they moved more towards like the tail of a fish, how it articulates, almost like a snake fish-like device traveling through.
Little spermies.
Exactly.
Moving through your body. So what's your take on this idea of like putting stuff in your body? Because that's kind of where I draw the line at technology, and I feel like this is going to be the thing that separates me from, the millennial generation maybe, or my kids' generation, our kids' generation, that like, there's going to come a point where in one of the Apple keynotes, they stand up there and they're like, and now it's time for
your injection.
Right? Exactly. It's time for eye ejection.
We got rid of the iPhone jack. We're getting rid of the earbuds.
There's no headphone jack, but
your eye ejection.
Yeah, I mean, and you could imagine sort of a gradual like introduction of, say, an earring that doubles as your phone, that you just pop it into your lobe and the technology does all of the good stuff for you. I mean, that's not so unreasonable if you think about the size currently of a head jack, or what do you call it, a Bluetooth.
Right.
But things get smaller fast. Like it could certainly get down to, I mean, heck, the size that we have now, right? If you think about a Bluetooth earpiece, half of it is the part that wraps around your ear.
Sure.
So you could have that dangling off of an earlobe and probably be almost good to go. I would think pointing is maybe making sure it's oriented properly.
Yeah,
is the piece that's missing.
I imagine you could also probably use bones as the speaker.
Well, and then this is exactly where I'm going with this. Is like, there's I think it's like a Ray Bradbury science fiction where he says something along like the astronaut talks on his bone phone, which is just implanted in his jaw, right? So to me, that's kind of like the line. Like you can do whatever you want with technology. Strap me the hell into the Matrix. I'm there. Until there's a needle.
A needle.
Like
what if
that's kind of my thing.
Swallowed a pill?
It's kind of the same thing, right? Like,
But you take medicine, no?
Yes, absolutely, and I get what you're saying, and you're completely right. But I guess the difference is that the medicine is some chemicals that were derived. I get my aspirin. Somebody took some willow bark and isolated the proper chemical and learned to concentrate it into a point that it causes my blood cells or my blood vessels to loosen. Whereas, and again, maybe I'm thinking of this wrong, and maybe it's like, the problem is that in my head, it's little robots swimming around in my body. It's little inner space Dennis Quaid capsules, right? The size of a blood cell going through it. But so we've been talking through this whole thing about the idea of the robots and how they decide, right? So let's say that my little robot is programmed to destroy cancer cells.
Right.
What happens when the robot goes wrong and says destroy cells?
Well, I mean, I think
there's a glitch in the code, and that if-then statement.
I mean, it's guided by magnets, guided by another system.
Oh, good magnets! that will stop it from destroying every cell in my body from the inside. I'm not trying to come across as a technophobe. I'm anything but.
So what if they dissolved in your body?
You're getting there.
Okay.
But how do I know that the maker of my chemical concoction, because if there's anybody I trust, it's Big Pharma. How do I know that you are actually dissolving these things? How do I know you're not collecting it so that someday you can show up with your giant floor magnet and strap me to the floor until I give you all of my money? Or I don't know. This is the stuff of science fiction, but
right.
To me, that's sort of the I'm safe until it goes in my body is kind of my restriction. You're making valid points. I think you're completely right.
Maybe Monsanto and their GMO corn will be in your nightmares.
See, now where do you come down on GMO?
Not the biggest fan of it.
And why is that?
I think there's too many unknowns.
Right, but unknown by whom?
By me.
That's the proper definition, absolutely. But the counter argument on GMO, right, is, well, we've been breeding things forever. What difference does it make if we've just gotten a lot better at breeding them?
Right.
We've instead of taking centuries for us to work it out, we now can do it super quick. What's the deal? What's the difference?
I mean, I guess I don't know what we're sacrificing. Is it making it toxic over time? Is it depriving me of certain nutrients?
That's the scary thing, is the sort of I find GMO to be very difficult to do any research on because half the internet is filled with frantic, we're all going to die because of GMO. And the other half is calm down. Right. And the same thing is true for a lot of stuff. Right? Vaccinations,
yep.
Artificial sweeteners. It's very difficult to get to the sort of no, I'm a doctor. I sit in a lab and figure this out. Here you go.
You're just don't be Dr. Oz.
I said a doctor. But yeah, so with GMO, it's what's the difference between, you read an article that says, it turns out that monarch butterflies die if they touch the corn. Well, who said that, and how do they find it out? And I'm not saying it's wrong. It might be the case, and if it is, holy shit, let's fix that. But I don't know where it all comes from. So GMO seems like one of those things that's just like I was being a minute ago. It seems like one of those things where everybody's just kind of scared. And we all have our different things that we're scared of, right? In Russia and Eastern Europe, they don't use microwave ovens. But they do, I believe, irradiate their food that we're scared of, right?
Interesting.
And it's one of those things where irradiating food gets rid of so much more of the possible contaminants and botulism and whatever will die, whereas our cooking doesn't necessarily always do that as we can find from the E. coli. But that's where our limit is in terms of what we're cool with. And it's different for different people, as we've demonstrated by experiencing a couple of our things. So if you're listening, let us know. What are the things that creep you out technology-wise? Would you let little tiny metal fish come into your body and make you better? Would you have to be, under threat of dying in order to want to do it? Let us know what your take is. Hit us up on Twitter. Hit us up on the website, goodtalknetwork.com. There's a contact button in the upper right. Or I guess if you're on a mobile phone, it's just at the top. Let us know what you think.
Have you ever had a business idea and it really starts to take off to the point where you really need multiple phone numbers and really like a PBX in the cloud? Well, I'd recommend Grasshopper. It's a great way to immediately ramp up on 1-800 numbers, extensions, etc. So if you want to learn more and support the Diginauts, preferably, please go to goodtalknetwork.com/ads. Thanks a lot.
For our final segment today, we are going to do something called What's Your Take? And we're thinking this is going to be how we end most of our episodes.
And it really gives you an opportunity to participate and really become part of future episodes.
Yeah, we're looking for your response to us. You can do a lot of things. You can tweet us. You can hit us up on the website, or you can go to our page and call our phone number and leave a voicemail. And if you do that, we may very well sample your conversation and put it into the podcast next week. And what we're going to do is we're going to just kind of hit up a controversial topic in the area of technology and society each week. We're going to explore it a little bit ourselves, and then we're going to ask you what you think. And then when we come back the following week, we will discuss what you said about what we said.
And hopefully you had a lot to say.
So the first one we're going to visit is an article from USA Today. This came out on September 16th. The headline is 18-year-old sues parents for posting baby pictures on Facebook.
Tragic. But it can be. I mean, if you think about it, so many parents scold and warn their children. There are consultants that warn children how to use social media, what not to do, what to do. I mean, in reality, parents share a lot of photos.
They really do. In fact, the article says that according to Parent Zone, a UK-based website, the average parent shares almost 1,500 photos, mostly on Facebook, by the time their kid turns 5.
Wow.
So do you share pictures of your kids online?
Without a doubt. And you imagine, if you have a family event or you're out with friends, they're taking photos. So you could probably multiply that by 10x.
Right.
And
I do as well. My wife is way worse than I am in terms of sharing pictures. I'm an older dad, and so I went through the phase of watching all of my friends have their kids.
So you're sick of all the photos?
Yeah, there's that sort of like, oh, Ralphie ate a Cheerio, and you're like, yeah, okay, swell. That's keep it yourself.
Right.
So I've done a little bit of restricting myself, and you know what? I'm not going to give you, Facebook audience, every banal update that happens with my kids every day. That said, there's a lot of people on Facebook who are like, no, show us your kid. We want to see more pictures. He's so cute, or whatever.
So should she have sued her parents' friends?
Yeah, you're getting more complicated into it already. You're diving straight past the main thing. Should she sue her parents, right? And we're talking about should she, go after the other people. I mean, and this has to do with social media etiquette in general.
Right.
If you take my picture and put it on Facebook, is that okay? What if I don't want my picture on Facebook? I mean, there's one level is, can you tag me or not? And I have some control over that.
Right.
But do I have control over the fact that you took the picture of me?
No.
Well, but if I'm an actor, if I'm a model, a member of SAG, let's say.
Oh, so a waiver.
Yeah, absolutely, right. If I am the kind of person who sells my image in exchange for dollars, then shouldn't I have the ability to control where my image is published?
But
you didn't pay me.
So if you're an actor, I see you in a restaurant, I take a photo of you and post it to my Facebook. I'm not making money off that. So I'm not really infringing on
and
your
obviously this is
your earnings.
Legal gray area, yes. Well, but maybe you are. Maybe I'm, you know, a 90-year-old actress who hasn't had a picture taken in 40 years, and I'm waiting to sell the picture on my deathbed to, I don't know. I'm making the story up, right? But the point is that, like, yes, some law is defined by that, right? Some law is defined by, did you harm my ability to make my own money? That's kind of where intellectual property law lands. That's kind of the decision-making point. Or did you defame my character with your representation?
You think about the kid on that Nirvana album where he's naked floating in the pool.
Right.
He didn't have a choice.
Right.
The parents made that choice. Now, granted, that wasn't social media, but I would imagine if that photo was posted to Facebook, and if Facebook existed back then, you probably wouldn't be too happy.
It's a little bit different, though, because the Nirvana album is quasi-anonymous. We know who that kid is, right? Like,
right.
Or, excuse me, we sort of don't know who that kid is. He was the kid on the Nirvana album.
Yeah, but there's been articles. He's surfaced.
But he spoke up. He didn't have to.
I think he actually tried to replicate the photo recently.
Interesting.
He wasn't naked, though.
There was a picture from, or there was a little bit of an uproar recently from the first Superman movie. The little 5-year-old kid who was standing there naked, who was supposed to be Superman. When he first landed, he comes out naked in the 1980s movie. And his little willy is free to the wind.
Free willy.
And he said something to the effect of, like, I didn't get a choice about, sitting there naked for everybody.
Right.
Not cool, Mom and Dad. I believe is what happened. This is going to be one of those podcasts where I just say random things that I think I heard. And I should be careful about that. But I
should check his royalties.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But I mean, this is the thing, right? Like, is it okay because the parents made him some money? I mean, that kind of speaks to the whole idea of parents who have child models and child actors and that sort of thing. Is that okay? Did the kid didn't get to make informed consent? It's theoretically it's part of a parent's job to make those decisions on behalf of their kid. And the woman who did this lawsuit, she's from Austria, and she says, look, they knew no shame and no limit. This is a quote from the article, and didn't care whether it was a picture of me sitting on the toilet or lying naked in my cot. Every stage was photographed and then made public. She's seeking compensation and wants the photos to be removed.
I guess what's the damages if it's just friends and family?
I assume
her relatives,
right?
mocking her?
Like again, she owns the right to her image. Now the father argues, no, I took the picture. I own the right to the image. So it's like that again. That kind of copyright, does it fall to the person who took the picture?
Right.
Do you have some control over, what does and doesn't happen to your particular image? I mean, the interesting wrinkle that they introduce into this as well is that Facebook itself doesn't let you have an account, in theory, until you're 13 years old. Right. Now, I, in a past life, was a middle school teacher. I promise you that, and this was back when Facebook was well, let's say not the province of my mom, but back when Facebook was the emerging kind of like, hey, I can't believe you're still on MySpace. You should check out Facebook. So it was the cool thing to be on. And the middle school kids at that time definitely were like, some of them were like, yeah, I know I'm 11, but all you have to do is click the little box, right? Kind of thing. But anyway, if we're talking policy and morality and whatever, if the company itself doesn't allow you to have an account until you're 13, then how does that reflect on the idea of photos of people under 13?
That's an interesting point.
Really? I think that's like the least interesting point. From the point of view of like, who cares what Facebook allows or doesn't allow? Right. Facebook is the medium that, where this happens, but it could just as easily be Twitter or, it could just as easily be a corkboard at the center of town. As far as I'm concerned, it comes to this idea of like, do you have privacy? Do you have privacy before age 18? Do parents have the right, does it matter what's in the pictures? If it's a picture of you smiling and happy on your first day of school, is that okay to share? Whereas, as this person says, you lying, if you're naked or using the bathroom, is that where it's not okay? Whereas the other picture is okay?
I guess I don't get how she was damaged. Like, I guess I need to understand.
Well, she's embarrassed. She's had literally 1,500, different people have different concepts of privacy, right? And fundamentally, and remember, in Europe, they have the sort of like, we're going to sue Google for the right to be anonymous. Like, we want to be not known, right? If you type in my name, you can't necessarily find me. I feel the same way. I would like to be able to control which things do and don't show up if you're talking about me.
Freedom of the press.
Yes. For things that happened, like certainly if I, commit a crime or if I did something newsworthy or whatever, but when it's just sort of like, that's the photo that I uploaded to my Yelp account 3 years ago, and I've since, shaved my hair and don't want any pictures. I don't know. I'm just saying, like,
you should take that photo down.
But the kid didn't have a choice. All right? So exactly, you should take that photo down, and that's part of what her lawsuit is about. Is she's saying she's suing for compensation, but she's also saying get those pictures off the internet. And did her rights change now that she's 18?
Maybe she's already been compensated. Maybe her parents paid for college.
If they had been selling it, again, as we come back to modeling and acting kind of thing, sure. If that was what happened, then there's a different kind of legal case there. I don't think we know that about this situation. There's nothing in the article about this. And again, we're talking about this. We could abstract this a step and say that it's not even about this particular case. It's about this idea of, is it okay? Do you as a parent have the right to display your kid's image everywhere? And then the other side of it is you brought up facial recognition software earlier.
Right.
Do you want to create a digital thumbprint for your kid so that the computer system knows all these things about you or, about your kid? And maybe
Almost
that comes down to
creepier.
Right? And I don't even know what's creepy about it, right? Like, because really digital recognition, you're like, there's sort of the shady government scariness. But really what it probably comes down to is some database somewhere is, 40 years from now, the Facebook model, once they've bought Disney and McDonald's, they're going to they're going to basically advertise to you, right? They're going to, like, it just happened this week that somebody, some college kids developed a Minority Report style, like, advertises to particular individuals. And if I'm a kid who wanted to remain anonymous and I turn 18, I just became an adult with theoretically tabula rasa, rights as a member of society. And yet, thanks to my parents, the computer system already knows that I like, this restaurant and not that restaurant.
That's interesting. Or maybe you didn't like it, but it's assuming you like it
because
you were there.
Way. Yeah, right. It maybe doesn't care that you like it.
Right, inferred based on
it knows
a variety of things.
Maybe it can gather information about your socioeconomic class and advertise to you based on that and getting closer. We both work in marketing. We know that there are people out there who, not us, but there are people out there who try to, get as far down this road as they can. But anyway, this is where we want to hear from you who are listening. We are going to pick this subject back up again next week. We're going to talk a little, you may have noticed a lot of those were questions this time. So we'll maybe answer some of those questions ourselves next time. But we also want to hear what you have to say about it. As I said, look for our phone number on the website in the show notes. Look for both of us on Twitter. I am @DigitalDarren.
And I'm @eFader.
And we would love to have conversations with you all week long about this on Twitter. And then we will certainly read some of those tweets and, like I said, possibly play some of your voicemails on the show next week.
Nice.
Nice.
See you next week.
Good talk.